Welcome to everyone here in person today, to everyone who is visiting our service from home. The UU Fellowship of Lake Norman is an open and inclusive congregation. Our members walk diverse paths to find meaning and purpose, but we are united by our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of all and by the responsibility to express our faith through acts of justice and compassion. My name is Jim Price, and I've been an active member of this congregation since 2019 and a Unitarian since 2012. Our speaker today is our minister, the Reverend Pat Jobe, whose title is Stories from UU Social Action. Reverend Pat will emphasize that no social action happens without a congregation to back up all that we do beyond the congregation. It's pretty simple math. But the stories told will testify to the good that happens when people congregate. No guilt, just lots of fun storytelling. Today is definitely a day for one more step. We did that, and we shall overcome. Reverend Pat has been our pastor for this fellowship since August of 2020. He is married to his lovely bride, Gabe. He is an enthusiastic supporter of our fellowship, FeedNC, Heart of the Carolinas UU Animal Ministry, the Barefoot Ministry, Unity and Community, Doug and Pat Wall's Immigrant Outreach, and for all work done by UUs in our neck of the woods. And the woods are pretty wide, all the way down to Beaufort. And now I invite Reverend Pat for opening words. They may or may not come from a dump truck.
Ordinarily, I would never correct your pronunciation. But the mayor of Beaufort was once asked, is it Beaufort or is it Beaufort? And he said, you never sing America the Beautiful. So you'll never make that mistake again. Our opening words come from the auction. These are words that I heard last night. What a wonderful time. What a great night. I am so glad I'm able to give. I'm sure I'll be outbid. You might get it. Now tell Larry you have to put up with me. She's my mother. Did I win the lottery? Dig happy holes or don't dig any holes at all. Just today I said, dig happy holes. Can you guys do that? Can you dig happy holes? Miles is looking around like, what is he talking about? I was so pleased to be part of last night. One thing was so obvious. Most of us have all the stuff we will ever need. But we love gathering and being together. Parties, meals, boat rides, crab cakes, house concert, brunch, all the opportunities to be together, to connect with each other drew the most bids. Regardless of what all ever else you may find in our principles, we are very excited to be with each other. As Red Skelton used to say at the end of every broadcast, all we really have in this old world is each other. Man, oh man, did that ever come home to roost last night. What a night. What a wonderful time. Harvey, Doug, Pat, both Jims, Susan, Mika, Tim, Lynn, Mary, Sue, Linda, and Dick, everybody I just failed to mention, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Here, here.
Please join me in saying our chalice lighting words there in the order of service. Chalice to illuminate the world we seek. In our search for truth, may we be just. In our search for justice, may we be loving. And in loving, may we find peace. And now we'll welcome to the stage Autumn for the children.
Well, Pat's going to be speaking today about stories from UU Social Action. And couple weeks ago, I was online doing a little bit of historical research about the UUs, and during the summer of 1964, the civil rights movement, we had about 1,000 UU youth from a brand new organization, the Unitarians Universalists, because we formed, in 1961. And we had 1,000 youth that went to Mississippi to go down and register voters to vote for the first time. And we had approximately 35 adults that were staff from various congregations. But it was a humongous amount of teenagers and young 20-year-olds that showed up for this civil action. And this is during the time where several of them didn't make it home for some of their actions. And so the question that I was asking myself at the beginning of this was, what was being taught in the Unitarian churches and the Universalist churches in the 40s and the 50s to make all these kids get up, leave home, and drive across the country to do something for people that they don't even know? And I did a lot of research, and I could not find anything on racial identity or things that were specific to the civil rights movement that was being taught in either of the churches. But I did find a common thread that came over and over and over, and it was love was being taught. They were teaching kids universal love, and that there's a golden thread throughout all of the messages that was just love for everybody, regardless of what you look like or where you're from. And I think that's probably what got people up and got them out to come down to Mississippi. So today I'm going to be reading some excerpts from this book. It's called Be the Change, Make It Happen. And I'm going to be sharing this with our kids group. So, and we're also going to be going to our classroom and making a few crafts and getting our hands dirty with some dirt. So if you guys want to join us. So to sing us out, we are going to be singing Spirit of Life. It's in the back of your hymn book. If Ellery, would you like to come up? And our kids, we can come forward and transfer our flame as we proceed to our kids' classroom. So,
The words are on the back of the order.
oh yeah, the Spirit of Life is on the back of the order of service.
Spirit of life, come unto us, sing in our hearts, all spirits of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots hold us close, wings set us free, Spirit of life, come to us, come to peace.
And now please stay comfortably seated while Mike takes us with his music into a place of worship and contemplation.
Mighty can preach without saying a word. For those of you who may not have recognized it, Eleanor Rigby is one of the appeals that the Beatles made for us to notice all the lonely people. Lynn Henderson, I just got to give you one more shout out. You were awesome last night. You took good care of us, you and Mary. Thank you so much. Mary's chickens made out like banjos. They got the leftovers. I know. Listening to Autumn talk about registering voters, I hope you all know that President Trump got rid of the Taylor Amendment. The Taylor Amendment was put forward by President Johnson to try to limit ministers using their pulpits to support various politicians and to support various political causes. And President Trump did us the great favor of getting rid of that. So I won't be in any trouble if I tell you that when Harvey Gantt was running for the Senate, I worked in his campaign as a volunteer. And one of the things we did was register voters. And one of the places we did it was at the senior center in Rutherford County. And I was sitting across from an African-American woman getting ready to fill out her registration card, take care of her. And she said, honey, I just want you to know that I'm 90 years old and I never voted in my life, but I'm voting this time. Today, I'm telling 4 more stories. 4 is a powerful number, imbued with magic and mystery from places like the 4 seasons, 4 strong winds, 4 directions on the compass, 4 in the morning being a tough time to wrestle fears and anxieties, and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There's a great old joke about a football coach taking a prospective player in to meet the math professor. And he says, Prof, this boy is going to be a great football player, but he needs a really easy math test to place out of freshman math and be eligible to play. And so the math professor said, son, what's 2 + 2? And he said 4. And the coach said, give him another chance. So here's story number 1. The Reverend Charlie Tyler was with us a few weeks ago. And he told a story. Well, when he was here, he talked about centering our lives. I'm sure many of you remember his wonderful job that he did talking about centering life in values and spiritual energy that keeps us on the right path. He spent Easter Sunday with a church he had once served out of a hardcore conservative fundamentalist tradition. He said it was the first time he had been back in more than 10 years. And although he had the deepest respect for the young minister in the pulpit and his handling of a message he clearly believed, Charlie reported that the man made no mention of the social ills challenging contemporary society. Charlie said the only use the speaker had for religious faith was to deal with things on the other side of death. The problems of this life have been relegated to politics, education, psychology, biology, chemistry, and weather. Nothing about religious life for this young man was to inform his work to solve any of our social problems. In the talk back after the service, one of the women in Charlie's congregation said that kind of religion is embodied in the Apostles' Creed, where we are taken from the birth of Jesus to his death in one phrase, and then he rises again on the 3rd day without any reference to his message of love, forgiveness, food for the hungry, and release for the prisoners. Charlie and others at that gathering affirmed that we, as Unitarian Universalists, are so glad that we emphasize social problems and solutions, that we are very comfortable protesting, writing letters, making phone calls, doing the hard work of pushing for goodness and mercy here on this side of the Rainbow Bridge. Some of you know that Kurt Vonnegut said, "I do good things in my life without any hope of it affecting my life after I die." Story number 2. After Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act, became law, it was clear that the South Carolina General Assembly was not going to extend Medicaid benefits to some 60,000 poor people in the Palmetto State who were not yet poor enough to qualify. The action of the legislatures left billions of dollars in Washington and cost South Carolina the ability to hire new nurses, techs, EMTs, and doctors, and to shore up rural hospitals which were struggling to survive. Because the loss of the new money was so dramatic and the good that could have come was so great, several church leaders were asked to protest the action by being arrested, blocking a driveway into the state capitol. I was among them. And I was so glad Jim Childress asked me to go to Columbia to be arrested. Jim Childress was a great Unitarian Universalist, like our folks who meet the asylum seekers at the bus station in Charlotte, like our folks who serve meals at FeedNC, like our dog fence builders, like our RE program protesting climate change at the Bank of America. Jim Childress was determined to put action into play that reflected his beliefs. Now, let me pause here and say that social action is not all there is to Unitarian Universalism. As important as it is, what is going on right this second is awfully important. It is important that we gather, that Gail Arnold schedules these services. Jim, you be sure to mention to her when you get home that we gave her a shout out. That Agnes Fiore pays the bills and takes the money to the bank. And she encourages you to pay your pledges and your auction tickets. It's so important that Sandy McFeely prints our orders of service. Bless you by whatever deity you can find to bring you a blessing. Thank you so much for our orders of service. And that Quinn Payton broadcasts our services. You are the man. You are the man. Don't ever doubt it. I asked him one time if he felt like we were taking advantage of him. And he said, no, not really. And then he said, but now that you mention it. And we're so grateful to Mike. Oh, gosh. What happened? There you go. There you go. Mike and Teresa and Eddie and other musicians play for us. And Tim Brown sings so beautifully and sometimes leads music. And that Jim Price and others serve as worship associates. There is a heck of a lot that makes happen what is happening right now. So we're grateful. But lots of people who know anything about us know that we have worked against slavery, for women's rights, workers' rights. We have protested wars, and although the United Church of Christ crowd will argue the point, we claim to have performed the first same-sex legal marriage in the United States. There are so many stories from my being arrested in Columbia and being handcuffed and transported in the back of a police car. Here are the two that I tell the most. When we were arrested, several of the arresting officers were Black. More than once, we heard one of them say, "Thank you for doing this. If people had not been willing to do this 50 years ago, we would not be members of the Columbia Police Department." As a young man and I were being transported to the police station for processing, both of us thanked the cop driving the car. She was a former shore patrol officer from the Navy, And after we had said thank you a couple of times for the respectful treatment we had received from the police, she said, "I got to tell you, fellas, thank you is not something we hear too often from that seat back there." The city of Columbia dropped all charges against us after both times we were arrested. And the state of South Carolina is still one of the few states still not expanding Medicaid benefits. North Carolina has just this spring agreed to Medicaid expansion. And our Autumn Weathers, Sylvia Abney, Tracy Grimm, and Natalie Hellig were among the UU Justice supporters who made that happen. That is a big deal. That's a big deal. Of course, we are led by the very able and inspiring Reverend Lisa Garcia Sampson, who is the leader of UU Justice NC and who leads a Friday action hour each Friday. And many of the names you just heard are present for the action hour on Zoom. If you want to learn more about that, let me know. Story number 3. During the Vietnam War, a number of people evaded the draft by escaping to Canada. For some, this journey was expensive and arduous, leaving behind jobs, family, and for many, sacrificing futures they had planned and invested in here in the United States. One of those men stood on the dais of the Greenville Unitarian Universalist Fellowship and thanked us for being part of a network of safe houses that offered food, shelter, and transportation to men like him during Vietnam. The Unitarian Universalist tradition is of two minds when it comes to military service. Like the Quakers, the Amish, the Jehovah's Witnesses, and others, we support our young people when they wish to refuse military service. During times when young people are drafted, UU congregations will provide young people support in applying for conscientious objector status, or in severe cases, like already mentioned, help them escape the country to avoid military service. But unlike the Quakers and other pacifist religions, we also support our young folks who are serving. In fact, the armed forces love chaplains who come out of UUism because they can lead worship in any world religion and are often called on to minister to personnel from all traditions. Part of my own training involved a class I took with 2 Army chaplains. And finally, story number 4. I hope you can understand deeply why I tell this story. Although my brother and maybe many of you think I'm crazy, I have always been a friend to poor people. As you will hear next week, one of the tenderest parts of our work with dog fences involves service to the poor. And it is tender and full of grace. And if you don't think it's important, just listen to the passion in Jim Price's voice when he talks about it. But all of that is for next week. This week, I want to tell you a very simple story about how poor people are impossible to stereotype. Can't do it. They are not all worthless, shiftless, no account, self-sabotaging idiots who could live better lives if they would just make better choices. Of course, some of them are all those things and worse. Just like rich people and middle-class people, at least some of them are worthless, shiftless, no account, self-sabotaging idiots who could be living better lives if they would just make better choices. We may affirm the inherent worth and dignity of all, but some of us face real challenges around that principle. You know what I mean? One of your neighbors comes to mind. One afternoon on the Greenville campus, which was 9 acres and 33,000 square feet of worship, classroom, offices, and a full commercial kitchen, we were preparing to move a lot of furniture and equipment around, and it was a big job. A family drove up in a rattle trap that looked like pieces might fall off at any minute. It was a vehicle not unlike what the Beverly Hillbillies drove. A disheveled woman who, like me, lacked a few teeth and looked like she might have gotten too much sun, walked up and said the town was fixing to turn their water off, and could we help? we had what was called a pastoral discretion fund. So I called the town and paid what was left on their bill so the water kept flowing. Normally, that would be the end of the story. But the woman then asked, "What can we do for you?" I said, "Sure, you can come help us tomorrow. We're moving furniture and various appliances, and it's going to be a big day of work." I said, "Y'all could show up first thing tomorrow morning." And they did. The following morning, they lifted and hauled and slid and shifted all kinds of stuff and put in a good couple of hours of work. Out the window went all those stereotypes of poor people being worthless and shiftless. This was an entire family of people who needed their water bill paid and did not expect something for nothing. They paid for their water with several hours of hard work. As we love to say in the Southland, bless their hearts. So here are the questions for the talkback. Have you ever felt guilty that you don't do more to support the social action of this congregation? If so, stop it. Your being here means so much. None of this would happen without a congregation. Unitarians give and give and give. Would you like to brag on your giving or someone close to you? If not, would you like to talk about the social action of so many UUs and how you are so happy to be part of something bigger than yourself? Jim, come help me supervise this crowd.
I have a lot of practice herding cats. This group doesn't need herding.
No, a good crowd,
Good folk.
with a few exceptions.
Good folk. Talk back, right?
Right. Tim, come up here.
Use the microphone.
Because if you come up here, the people at home can see you and hear you.
Right.
And if anybody else has anything they want to say, come on up and you can start after Tim stops.
Well, unfortunately, it's not quite talk back, but to contribute to the point. With the change by the Supreme Court this week, we're bound to have redistricting again in North Carolina, which will make our voting harder in the next several elections. And our get out the vote efforts will need lots of postcards, Sandy, and phone calls. I don't mind the phone calls, but I'm done with postcards. My hands can't take it no more. But I will retire again in December, if not sooner, and I will be active in the next election. And we just got to be ready. It's going to be a hard one.
Yeah, sure.
This is your chance.
This
Here
is,
comes Sue.
okay, good.
You do want us at the microphone?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Please, because then the folks at home can both hear you and see you.
Okay. I was this morning, I go to the Piedmont morning session for ethical explorations. And so this morning, Maryland has been for years, for months, discussing the Confederate monument over in Cornelius. And I was able to say, well, I was in the march 2 years ago.
Something like that.
And something like that. And I said, fortunately, our minister, Pat Jobe, made sure a lot of us were there. And we appreciated it. And I'm still talking about you. So thank you.
One of my colleagues served the Mount Zion United Methodist Church where the monument is. And she said to me, we talked about it, she said, it's hard for me to imagine that those men would want to be remembered for the biggest mistake they made in their lives. And that's what the Confederacy was. It's been romanticized. It's been put in artwork and song and everything, what those brave boys did for the Confederacy, but
I get it. I'll take care of that. You
it was
take care of
horrible.
By coincidence, yesterday, Unity and Community met. And we had a professor talking about the history of monuments and where they're erected. It's sort of contiguous to where there were lynchings, interestingly enough. And we also talked, some of the people there were from the Methodist Church, and talking about how intransient the people who own the monument were, because they don't want to talk about it. You can't reach them. And the church itself, the board of directors and the minister would like to see the monument removed, but they're not sure if the congregation will back them, and they're not sure it should come to a vote in any case. So what we did in our small group discussions was talk about what we could do to support movement in that difficult area. I'll tell you what my table thought of, and because most of them talked about education. My table said, we talked about guerrilla action. We talked about putting some, have alternate explanations near that, which put that monument in perspective. So people who saw the monument might also know the other stories. And I think if you did that, you'd get some publicity.
Mm-hmm.
But we were one group out of 7, so I'm not sure if that was heard. The other idea was to get art students in the community, have a contest to see who could design the best monument. And that would also get publicity. So it was fun, and I'll see where that goes with Unity and Community.
A little addition to that, if you remember last year, Black History Month, we did a series of articles about Black history. The Confederate monuments weren't built right after the Civil War to honor the dead, as they would claim now. They were built approximately 50 years after the Civil War, and it was mostly to remind Blacks to stay in your place. It really had nothing to do with the people. Yes, sir.
The monument looks towards Smithville, and the message is, stay in your place.
Stay in your place, yeah. It's sad. It's just really sad. Well, I got the floor. One more quickie.
Sure.
Okay, there was a horrible incident this week on the Davidson campus. It was right down the street. Somebody marked up they have outdoor classrooms with blackboards, and somebody wrote on there, "Kill all Jews and ends," which is just horrendous. The president of the college spoke or wrote that we respect the worth and dignity of all beings or all people. And when he said that, of course, I thought of us. It's our first principle. I don't want to take your thunder, bro. You're doing good.
No, you're not taking anything away from me.
You're doing good.
You're the guy. You're the worship associate. You're supposed to talk.
Okay.
I do want to say that I'm now on the board of Unity and Community, and I hated missing that meeting yesterday. But I knew if I showed up and then went to the auction, that I would probably be putting in a very long day. And I'm an old man, so I played the old man card and stayed home. But I did communicate with Pam and let her know that I want to process what happened. My hope for Unity Community is that they will give up on moving the monument, and that they will hold a press conference and get as many media outlets to cover the press conference in which they say, we think the monument is a great idea. In fact, we think slavery was a great idea, and we think the Confederacy was a great idea. And the fact that 600,000 people died during the Civil War because of that idiocy is no big deal. Let's just not worry about it anymore. Let's put flowers on the monument and remember the dead for their ridiculous sacrifice. What?
I don't know how many of you watched Sheldon on Big Bang, but I think that would be a sarcasm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sarcasm.
Oh, we got one more.
Come in. Straighten me out.
I would have to straighten me out, but that's not good. I had 2 ancestors who died in the Civil War. None of my ancestors ever owned a slave. We know our history back at least 8, 9 generations. We've been in the mountains around Asheville that length of time, very poor farmers. My grandmother was born in 1898, and she saw her first Black person when she was 22 years old. The two ancestors who died went off to fight for the Confederacy because they owed taxes on their land. They did not have the money to pay the taxes, and wealthier people in the area would find a poorer person who needed the money and say, you go fight in my place and I'll pay your taxes. And that's why they went. And one died in Ringgold, Georgia. The other made it back home to the mountains, and he died 3 years later. So there's a lot of stories behind the people who died in the Confederacy. But the monuments also that are around in the area where I grew up, they weren't built by people who had anybody who died in the Confederacy. They were built by more wealthy people who lived elsewhere and had a romanticized view of what had happened. And they weren't built right after the Civil War, so I can certainly agree with you there. But what I actually wanted to tell you was, get out there and volunteer. You are a group of people who have abilities and skills and wisdom and insight. And to quote an old song, take your passion and make it happen. It doesn't have to necessarily lie with something the congregation is doing. It may, but to toot my horn a little bit, my passion has been the environment for a long, long time. I am a founding member and a former board member of the Catawba Lands Conservancy. I serve a founding member. There were like 4 of us who founded it. We had no land to protect. Now they have massive, massive tracts of land. I am a founding member and a former board member of the Davidson Lands Conservancy. And that was the same thing. I served on the County Park and Rec Board for 6 years and the Davidson Park and Rec Board for 7 years. Why Park and Rec? They have a lot of land. And the only way we can protect that land is to own it. So whatever your passion is, whether it's one of the projects that we are doing as a congregation or something that's within our principles and our values, take your passion and go out there and make it happen.
Yay.
Okay. This fellowship is important to us all. The contributions we make today allow us to sustain and grow our congregation and to reach out to our community, as we're just talking about, both nearby and in the larger world. Your giving affirms our commitment to each other and to the community. With grateful hearts, we receive these gifts. May they encourage us to live lives of integrity, compassion, and peace. If you look with me in your order of service, there are some announcements I want to draw attention to. The social suppers, we often go out to eat after the service. It's a very informal and impromptu, but you might check with Linda Heidenberg to see where people are going, or Marge often knows. The movie Tuesdays, we go on Tuesday afternoons, usually to Birkdale. You get the senior citizens, for those who that's applicable, discount for the movie. This Tuesday is an excellent movie. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. And there was an excellent article in the Observer this week about the author of the book that the movie is based on. But that book has been banned by a number of schools. That over right there tell you it must be pretty good. So anyway, the check out the movies. It's a lot of fun. You see a good movie, and then we go have a little fellowship afterwards. Go out and get a bite to eat and smoke over the movie. Usually we vote on the movie 1 to 10. How you like the movie. The Heart of the Carolinas UU Animal Ministry. We are always at it, folks. And we dearly love it, as Pat alluded to earlier. Yesterday, we freed Roscoe And an interesting place, the owner had his Trump hat on the whole time. And I had several discussions with him about, a lot of it about Social Security, but it was my opportunity in a very nice way to try to educate him, because he told me that immigrants coming across the border are given a Social Security card when they walk across. So I tried to explain to him it doesn't really work that way. That wouldn't get you any money. But anyway, that's it. And we have a bill coming up on May the 12th will be the next one. This will be a unique one in that it'll be for numerous dogs. FeedNC meets on the second Thursday of each month. And I believe Sandy has a little announcement she wants to make.
You also need that mic offer a musical reflection when Sandy gets done.
We will do just that.
Every Sunday morning, I get an email from Paul Mihalik at FeedNC. And this one was particularly long. He had a long list of jobs that volunteer jobs that needed to be filled this week. We talked when the new facility opened, and their prediction is they were absolutely right. They needed twice the number of volunteers that they had been operating with at the old teeny tiny crowded facility. So if anybody wants to volunteer at the same time as I do one day this week, we could get another group and go. And
Why don't you forward the emails so you can see it
okay,
and what they need?
okay. It's some of it's early in the morning, but a lot of it's okay. So yeah, I'll send it around and we can do that. Okay, thanks.
The script and the order of service sometimes get a little out of.
I thought I was getting off the hook.
Oh, no, never. We got Pat holding you.
Let's do a song most of us know. It's called Peace Train. I've been happy, thinking about the good things to come, and I believe it could be something good has done. I've been smiling, dreaming about the world as one, and I believe it could be something good has done. Out on the edge of darkness, there rides a peace train. Peace train, take this country, don't take me home again. Well, I've been happy, thinking about the good things to come, and I believe it could be something good has done. Peace train sounding loud, ride on the peace train. You are here, come on, peace train. Peace train, holy road. Everyone jump on the peace train. Ooh, ah, come on, peace train. Get your bags together. We'll bring your good friends too, because it's getting nearer. Soon we'll be with you. Come and join the rhythm. It's not so far from you, and it's getting nearer. Soon it'll all be true. Peace train sounding loud and loud on the peace train. Ooh, ah, ooh, ah. Come on, peace train. I've been crying, thinking about the world as it is. Why must we go on? Why can't we live in this? Way out on the bridge above the street, there rides a peace train. Peace train, take this country, don't take me home again. Peace train sounding loud and loud on the peace train. Ooh, ah, ooh, ah. Come on, peace train. Jump on the peace train. It's the peace train.
Okay, the last song for the day is number 169, We Shall Overcome.
Good, it's in sync. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall hold hands someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday.
Pat, closing words?
Our closing words are very simple, and they're for all of you, whether you did a little or a lot, whether you spent hours and hours across days and weeks, Pat Wall, or barely did anything at all. Our closing words are vital, simple, and universal. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat, for the service today, and thank you, Mike, for the music. And now we'll extinguish the chalice. Join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words in the order of service. We extinguish this chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we meet again.
Let me just say, I know this is not in the order of service, but if you don't feel recruited today, just run back through your mind Lynn Henderson, Sandy McFeely, and Mike Song. Everybody get on the peace train.
Good job, Mike.